Hey, what's up guys? Gons here for the Face Like the Sun YouTube channel. It's crazy to see Jesus Christ be trending on my Facebook feed. And I don't know if that's because I'm a Christian or it's because it's Christmas time or whatever. But a closer look, and it says here, medical artist draws religious figure according to forensic anthropological research. And basically what they're peddling here is that they have a more accurate depiction of Jesus. And it comes from an article at DECEIT.com. And here's the image of the alleged more accurate Jesus. Now, before I move forward, if you go look at the first Age of Deceit, you'll see that I did use the, traditional, I guess, standard picture of Jesus as sort of the tall, long-haired, beard kind of Jesus. And since then, I stopped using that imagery because I learned that this was a depiction made by Pope Alexander VI. And the theory goes, he instructed the destruction of all art depicting a Semitic Jesus and instead commissioned to create paintings of a Caucasian Jesus, and his son, Cardinal Cesare Borgia, was the model for the paintings. And there you have it. All the Christians today use that Jesus as a white man. And that's not anything against the white race or anything like that. I know there's sort of a white genocide topic out there, and I definitely think there's something to it. And I've been listening to different people that have looked at that topic, and I do think that there is something to that destruction of the white culture, especially in Europe right now. There is a systematic genocide basically happening of the white nations. But that's a whole nother topic. But sticking back to this whole thing, in terms of using an image of Jesus, I stopped using it altogether. And if you look at videos, especially this year as I started pumping out more content on the YouTube channel, I never use an image of Jesus anymore. If I do, it's, his back is turned or, it's a silhouette of some kind. I just try not to use it whatsoever, because part of what we're commanded to do is not to use graven images, and not that it's a sin to use a depiction of Jesus. I just realized that there is no description of Jesus in the Bible, at least pre-resurrection, and I'll get to that in a moment. But basically, this whole trending thing came from an article on DECEIT.com, I think that's how you pronounce it, and the article is called Photo, the Real Face of Jesus Uncovered. And here's the picture, and basically, this forensic anthropologist took a few skulls from that area and from that time and basically created what he thought Jesus might look like. So really, it's not really based on anything too concrete. But when I saw this image, and I know a lot of people noticed that they recognized this image, and I had a few people inform me of where it came from, because I remember this. It was from a TV series called Son of God. It was a documentary. I think it was on the Discovery Channel where I saw it, I think in America. And basically in this thing, it's a secular perspective looking at Christianity, and how they try to make it sound fair, but then at the same time they sort of underhandedly bash Christianity and Jesus and stuff like that. Well, in the process, at the very end, they show a 3D rendering of what Jesus might have looked like from the same guy, Richard Neve, who's the forensic anthropologist. He constructed the face of what Jesus might have looked like, and he, used the olive skin and the much darker complexion and all this stuff. So that's where this image comes from. So I don't know why they're using it now to be like, hey, new vision of Jesus, So it's very strange that they're doing that, unless, of course, there's something to this idea that the Antichrist will present himself as the Jewish Messiah, and, we have to sort of understand in the public what a Middle Eastern Jesus might have looked like. Well, in any case, getting back on point here, as I said earlier, there's no depiction of Jesus physically in the Bible pre-resurrection. Well, that's sort of not correct either. Let me focus in on what I mean by that. In Matthew 17:2, there's a depiction of Jesus, and this is his transfiguration. This is what the channel Face Like the Sun, this is where I get that title from. Matthew 17:2, and he was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became white as light. Okay? So this is the moment when Peter, James, and John are up on a mountain, a high mountain, and Moses and Elijah appear with him, and he's transfigured into presumably his true form, if you want to call it that. And what's interesting is that we see this again in the book of Revelation. Revelation 1:16 says, in his right hand he held 7 stars. From his mouth came a sharp 2-edged sword, and his face was like the sun shining in full strength. And then Revelation 10 verse 1, many people believe this is also Jesus being depicted again. Then I saw another mighty angel coming down from heaven, wrapped in a cloud with a rainbow over his head, and his face was like the sun, and his legs like pillars of fire. And so here we have a vision of Jesus in his sort of true state of being. And I think this is when he sort of transcends the physical boundaries and he's showing his perfected state, God being perfect, being pure light. And I think this is the moment when Jesus is showing that he is God. Okay, he transcends this physical realm. And so what's really interesting, though, getting back to the Matthew 17:2 passage, a lot of people think that this mountain where Jesus was transfigured is Mount Tabor. And actually, another Saint Jerome from the 4th century, they made it a tradition. They have the Church of Transfiguration located on top of Mount Tabor. And, people visit that location and they think, oh, this is where Jesus was transfigured in Matthew 17:2. But actually, I think, and this, I'm not the first person to think this has actually been suggested by a bunch of scholars. I think it's Mount Hermon. And this was first suggested by R.H. Fuller and J. Lightfoot. And there's two reasons why they presented it. First off, it's the highest mountain in the area. And the, transfiguration took place on a high mountain, which is what's mentioned in Matthew 17:1. And it's located right near or right behind Cesare of Philippi. And in Matthew 16, just a chapter before, Jesus tells Peter that he is the Son of God, and, on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. And, the debate rages on, between Catholics and Protestants, is the church built on Peter, or is the church built on this truth about who Jesus is? Well, I think the latter, obviously, but it goes much deeper than that. And if you look at some of the things behind what's going on, where he is, it's quite powerful. Now, most of Jesus's ministry throughout the New Testament is sort of undoing Babylon. Okay, all the things that were established, the pagan establishments that were, made throughout that region, Jesus is going through and undoing it. There's a reason why he sent out 70, to proclaim and heal and all this stuff, right? There's a reason for that. And also, right here, where he's at Caesarea Philippi, it's actually the foothills of Mount Hermon, okay? And Mount Hermon, according to the book of Enoch, which is confirmed in Genesis 6, is where the 200 fallen watchers first came down to do their thing, way back in the beginning, right? And ever since then, that mountain, Mount Hermon, was considered a cosmic mountain of the gods. It was kind of a pagan center for the so-called gods, the pantheon. And it was also in the land of Bashan, which means land of the serpent. And what's really crazy is that when he says the gates of hell will not prevail, well, right in that region, there's this thing called the Grotto of Pan, okay? And the Grotto of Pan is called the gates of Hades. So basically, when Jesus says the gates of hell will not prevail, he's standing in front of the gates of Hades, the Grotto of Pan. And it's even more of a declaration because in that next chapter, in Matthew 17, he goes on top of the mountain, right where those fallen watchers first landed, and he is transfigured, almost to say, hey, watchers, fallen angels, guess who is going to be victorious in this? It's Jesus Christ. It's the Son of God, the real Savior of the world, not these other watchers who just came down and lusted after women, right? And created the race of Nephilim, which I think represents the principalities, the powers, the fallen spirits, if you will, the divine beings who rejected God. So again, I think this is Jesus declaring that he is God. And it goes back to Psalm 82. And we've talked about this before as well with the divine council concept. Psalm 82 talks about God judging the other gods. And I have a video on that. If you want to check out a little bit deeper what's going on there with Elohim being a word that represents God, capital G God, and also lowercase g God, as well as other things in the Bible. So it's a whole nother study if you want to dig into that. But consider that he says, I said you are gods, you are all sons of the Most High, but you will die like mere mortals, or you will die like men. And then this is repeated in John 10, when the Pharisees are accusing Jesus basically of proclaiming to be the Son of God. Jesus basically quotes Psalm 82, saying that he and the Father are one. Okay, so it all connects. There's this consistent thing happening all the way from the book of Genesis through Psalms, through the book of John and the Gospels. It's quite incredible when you start tying all these things together, all the way to Matthew, all the way to Revelation, and, his glorious appearing. And so all this to say that this whole vision of Jesus and what he looks like and all this stuff, let's just remember what happened to Moses in Exodus 33 when he asked God if he can see his glory, right? He asked him, can I see your glory? And basically God said, no, you can see my backside, basically. And God says in verse 20, you cannot see my face, for man shall not see me and live. Now, I think it's because his glory is so fantastic that either you have to see it in a vision or, you just have to be protected in some way. And I think during the Transfiguration, Peter, James, and John were somehow protected from dying, from seeing Jesus in his full glory. But also, this shows his ultimate authority, that God in the physical realm, if he manifests purely in the physical, it's just too much for any of us to handle, right? So focusing on what the incarnate pre-resurrection Jesus looked like is almost a lost cause. There's no reason for us to really care about it, because ultimately, not only is he unable to be seen in our fallen state here, but his radiance is so glorious that he's actually going to outdo the sun. And that there's some prophecies talking about that we can get into another time. So I just wanted to point this out, and hopefully it's an encouragement to you guys that, we shouldn't really bother too much about what he looks like at all. We should be focusing on who he is. And I wish this whole trending thing of Jesus's face was more about who he is and not so much what he looked like, because it doesn't really matter. But again, if the whole thesis about the Antichrist presenting himself as a Jewish Messiah is anywhere accurate, then it's interesting to ponder that maybe there's a reason why this depiction of an alleged Jesus is getting thrown out there 15 years after the fact. Just something to consider. Hope you guys have an awesome day. God bless.